Well, and their system, I think, like I really work from, even though I may be working, the identified person I'm working with is a child. Before I even get to there, I look at what are the systems they're connected to.
Yeah.
And if my sense is when I'm doing, that query phone call or that intake session with the caregiver, that they're either have their own trauma or traumatic experiences, or they're having a hard time responding and being the external brain to the child's experiences,
Yeah.
then before I even start working with the child, I'll do that parent psychoed piece first around, all that wonderful work of Bruce Perry, the neurosequential model of therapeutics.
And there she is. Oh.
That was fun.
That was fun. Mommy enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. You were right behind the curtains. That's where you were. Well, hi, Theresa. Thank you so much for being a guest on our third annual Innovative Child Therapy Symposium. I met you through a mutual friend of ours, Dr. Jen Lefebvre. I have great respect for her, and I've learned so much from her. And she connected me to you. And through that connection, I really learned that you work with a lot of clients that have experienced trauma. So that's what we're going to talk about, the treatment of trauma and how that could actually look in practice. But before we do that, let me have you just tell people who you are and what you do.
Oh, I'm Theresa Fraser, and I'm a child play therapist supervisor here in Nova Scotia, Canada. We're just north of Maine. I'm a trauma specialist. So because of that, I really try to look at what are the neuro experiential kind of opportunities and interventions we can integrate with play therapy approaches with people across the lifespan.
Nova Scotia by Maine, lobster. It's cold.
Yeah,
It's
it's cold
beautiful.
right now.
Super cold.
Yeah.
So when you look at like the work that you do, you think about when you say neural integrations, it sounds like you do a lot of consideration of the brain and the body and everything that goes with that. Okay, so what I was thinking would be helpful, kind of looking at like a comprehensive treatment of, and I know every person presents with different needs and different resources, but when you're working with a child, say that has been traumatized, what might that treatment look like?
Such a great question, because students, I have a training program here, a foundational training program for play therapy here as well. And we all want to kind of figure out what's the protocol or the steps we need to take and what would be the best approach. And as you said, we always have to tailor what we're doing to the little person or the big person who has a little person inside of them that's sitting in front of us.
Oh,
So, obviously we do what you had a
yeah, I'm
reaction.
thinking like inner child, thinking about like
Oh,
I'm 48 and I have an inner child that may be 8 or 7, so
yeah.
can show up even in our adult clients.
And in us, as
Yes.
we know, that's a whole other conversation, but in us too. Yeah. So, the very first thing, I mean, the literature and many different protocols and models teach us that we have to create safety with clients right away. And I don't even like using the word clients. I think that's really kind of oppressive. I try and say children, youth, and families.
Oh,
And but of course we know, and I have supervisees that have taken your EMDR training and just rave about it.
no
So I
way.
hope to do that.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. And I remember when I did my EMDR training like 15 years ago in Michigan, they talked about, you go to safe place first. And at the time I was like, but what if you don't know safe place? And what if safe place is scary
ooh,
because you have comfort in chaos? And, many of the children we work with create those kind of chaotic milieus around them at, whether it's at home, school, or in the community, because that at least is predictable and they have some control or feel like they have some control. So I think trying to create safeties, we have to be really considerate of whose definition of safety are we looking at. And yeah.
It's such a good point. When I think about the word safe and what our clients have experienced, sometimes safe doesn't feel safe. Safe feels vulnerable. It feels scary. So even just changing the verbiage around it to peaceful or calm, actually calm sometimes can even be like,
yeah, what's calm when my regulatory system feels like I'm going to jump out of my skin most of the time.
Yeah, the language around it. Gosh, I felt that, and it's amazing, like the work that we do. And I know we talked a little bit before this video and talked about like the importance of looking at the system and working with parents. And we have our own experiences too. I've learned so much from Lisa Dion about how she talks about we need to actually be mindful of our experience with in session with the client.
Well, and their system. I think like I really work from, even though I may be working, the identified person I'm working with is a child. Before I even get to there, I look at what are the systems they're connected to.
Yeah.
And if my sense is when I'm doing, that query phone call or that intake session with the caregiver, that they're either have their own trauma or traumatic experiences, or they're having a hard time responding and being the external brain to the child's experiences, then before I even start working with the child, I'll do that parent psychoed piece first around, all that wonderful work of Bruce Perry, the neurosequential model of therapeutics. And I have a professor hat on as well. And I teach trauma classes and was teaching with students all last week. We were focusing on, if you have a little person that is, in their dinosaur brain, what are activities that we can do with them to help them self-regulate? And, when I first started learning about that, when The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog came out, we really kind of looked at, okay, it's a powerful book, but a hard book too. And I'll get parents to read it sometimes but I say, but let's debrief it. And if it's, too upsetting, stop and notice that and notice how you feel, and then let's connect. But that upside down kind of pyramid symbol that he has around how the brain wires, when that first came out, we would look at with, my students and staff, it would be, okay, what part of the brain are we going to be targeting? It isn't the frontal cortex, which is what CBT does so well, but for a little person, they may not be ready for that. They're not even developmentally ready for that. Yes. If we're going to look at the limbic system, what do we do? Okay, well, now we recognize what really would be helpful is to start each session with a dinosaur brain kind of activity, a sensory grounding experience before we get into the limbic system stuff. So I try and do that with parents, that psychoeducation with parents, to say, if the child's having a meltdown, and aren't we so lucky? There's been so many wise people that have come before us, and we can pull things.
Girl, yes.
Like, we don't have to
recreate the wheel.
Gary Landreth, right? Like his acronyms of, acknowledge what's going on under the behavior and communicate what you're expecting, and then target what you want to hear. I use that acronym so often with parents to say,
ACT.
Yeah, that ACT, it's so simple and so helpful. And
I'll put the link to the, I know they have a workbook that's on Amazon, the child-parent relationship therapy book or training, but there's also training that goes with it too. That ACT limit setting model, it's fascinating. It works for us, helps us as therapists, but also we could teach it to parents too.
Well, I teach it with parents all the time, because I'll say to them, if your child who has trauma is having a reaction to something in the environment, and especially foster parents or adoptive parents, and that you don't understand what that's about, it's so easy to just deal with the behavior, but we need to look at what's happening underneath the behavior. And being able to use that acronym empowers them when they're feeling activated and their frontal cortex is shut down, right? When they're not able to be in their thinking brain. I was like, if you can just remember that acronym, and then you can co-regulate and notice how you're feeling. And then what do you need to take care of yourself so you can give your child in that moment what they need of you? So co-regulation and connection, I mean, it's so important even before the therapeutic process starts to make sure, the parents can do that. And also schools, like I'll go into schools and talk with teachers who are struggling to say it must be really hard when you have a classroom of 22 and, this is what's going on in this little person in this environment. So, I'll share ACT with them too. And then I'll talk about, how can we calm everyone's regulatory system down, and can we be curious, put our detective hats on and figure out, is there something in this environment that we could change or alter when that child's getting activated? So important for the new therapist, if they have, well, any therapist, but for the new therapist to start practicing and asking questions around who are other important support people in that child's
Yes.
system, and how can we empower them to kind of connect and hold the space for that child as we're going through the therapeutic process. Because as we all know, when we start to do trauma work, sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, and the
Yes.
child can't talk to us about it, but they will show us.
Yes.
So the adults will go, I don't know if this therapy's working because, they're not sleeping at night, or they're not doing this or not doing
It
that. So
flares
I really
up.
focus on them. And then, and sometimes that means I'm doing psychoeducation with them. Sometimes it means I'm pulling in some of those neuro experiential models like Safe and Sound protocol I use a lot. And it's such a wonderful
Good.
audio program to use,
Yeah.
like have the parent maybe doing Safe and Sound, or I use neurofeedback as well. Neurofeedback in a room by themselves while I'm doing work with a child, and then they can join us halfway through the session. So starting with a good intake, really being concerned about how can we empower the other adults on that child's team to also be players in the treatment process? How can we support them if they're struggling with their own trauma or in reaction to the child's trauma? And then making a decision at that point, what interventions are we going to use and what's going to be the most successful? And sometimes that means having the parent heavily involved right at the beginning, and sometimes it'll be at the middle stage of therapy, or have a parent come the last 10 minutes of a session. But I think it's really important I try to work in tandem with all of those folks and work really prescriptively and integratively where I can.
Oh my goodness. So many things are coming up. You have so many like SSP, neurofeedback, your EMDR,
Yeah.
like not just EMDR, like you have all these tools. But when you're talking about how you work with a client, it sounds like you're like connecting with them first. And even like being able to, even the teachers, I see you have like 20 kids in your classroom. That's got to be really hard. Like that version of the ACT with them, or connect and redirect. I know, Theresa, when I first started out, I was hungry for that. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
I
But
know.
just give me a list of things that this child needs. And it's deeper than that. They need us. Can
Yeah.
you talk about that? I think that's something that I think as new therapists, sometimes we don't necessarily understand that it's not about doing, it's more about being with.
Yeah. 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 There's a Canadian academic child and youth care practitioner by the name of Tom Garfed, and he uses the term we space. So he
Ooh,
talks about how it's there's the child space and my space, and then the space we co-create together in that moment, whether it's virtually or whether it's in the play therapy space. But it's a connection, and anyone listening, when you're connecting with someone who's in your office,
I
and
feel it.
that for that little person, it's just the most important time in that moment. Like something really big is happening. And then because of that, it's happening in us too. And
Yes.
they pick up on that, and they know that we care about them and we respect them, and that we're not working on our own agenda. These little kiddos even big kiddos with little kiddos inside of them, they get it so in their body when someone's trying to control the process and go on their agenda versus just really being with them,
Ooh.
journeying with them. But for us, that takes I was doing supervision with a supervisee, and she won't mind me sharing this last night. And she said, like when school, they talked about the power of silence, and I heard it and I got it, but I didn't really know it until I started experiencing it.
Oh,
And I
wow.
said, so hard, isn't it? She said, yeah, like I feel like, oh my gosh, what should I say? What should I say? What should I say? I said, we all do that. And then you have to tell that little part of you that is asking that to just say, it's okay. We're just going to be here with them right now and listen so that we are communicating verbally and non-verbally. I see you
Ooh,
and I hear you and you're important to me. And
ooh.
you're important to me. If when we know we've communicated that, it reinforces that feeling for us of, okay, like I can really join with this person and we'll figure out the next steps together.
Oh my
So
goodness.
all of these interventions we've talked about, okay, they're and there's a lot more, we could talk
Fantastic
about all the
ones.
different play therapy interventions like Sandtray or Theraplay. And I have all those tools in my bucket, but it's not going to be a helpful intervention if it doesn't fit for the person in front of me. So it's okay to just wait and be patient and just attune and connect as much as we can. And that trust the process statement that we've all heard in our training. I know for me, I was so blessed to have Gisela Di Domenico as a mentor in my
Oh, wow.
Sandtray. Yeah, like 6 years of her, I hear her on my shoulder all the time. Trust the process, trust the process. And by doing that, then you're going to know what the right intervention or model is to use with that little person. But for me, I can't work in 10 sessions and then we're done the program because as you know, as a therapist, we sometimes kiddos will show us a little bit, and Paris Goodyear Brown says that really well in her TEDx talk.
Oh, that's
Um,
such a good. We'll link below for that
isn't
one
it
too.
powerful? It's so
Yeah.
powerful. In that TEDx talk, it's, I hear you and I see you and I can hold more. Like you can trust me, I can hold more. And I can tell a story. I'm not breaching confidentiality of this. I was talking with a police officer who does interviews and he said to me, like my experience is like the kids they'll tell you the worst. So, that's the worst. And I said, and my experience is the exact opposite, that you get a little, and until you've created an attuned relationship where that child feels like you can hold that pain and that story, they're not going to trust you with anything more than that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's got to
and
be on their time. It's
got to
got
be
to.
on their time. And with students where I teach a trauma class too. And I'll say often, honestly, it doesn't matter what your grade is in this class. I know y'all want an A, but when the time comes, all that little person in front of you is looking at is, can you hold my pain? Can you handle me swearing at you? Can you handle me wanting to throw a chair as I talk about how I've been hurt? And then do you know what the next step is to reconnect with me? That's more important than any grade you're going to get. So yeah, what a privilege we have doing this work, eh? It just
Well, that just took me back to like different sessions to where it is an honor when we actually they show us their pain. They show it through their play, through their behavior, and
yeah.
just being with them in that space. That it goes back to like Dr. Bruce Perry's like the most powerful therapy is love, being there with them. Wow. Okay.
And
So,
I'm going to add one thing that he did an interview before at the beginning of COVID, which really like it was like, wow, like so simple and so powerful. And
yes.
I've used it with supervisees when they're struggling with online work sometimes. He said, that bottom up approach around repetitive intervention, what we need to remember even during COVID is if you have someone you're working with and they can't do, like for some reason they're not comfortable doing virtual or they have a hard time with the length of time, you'd almost be better to in the beginning, or either the beginning of the relationship or the beginning of therapy, or when they're experiencing a really difficult time, to connect with them more often in shorter periods of time. So if that means you're doing text therapy with them, every day for 5 minutes, that may be more influential in terms of healing than having that 1 hour session with them. So again, we have to like follow the lead of those that we're working with.
Yes, the
To
little
figure-
bite size. I know
yeah.
he in that book, What Happened to You with Oprah Winfrey, he talks about a case where he was working with this little boy and he would show up in just color with them for a few minutes here and there. And it built that trust, that familiarity, that predictability, all that kind of what like Dr. Porges talks about in the polyvagal theory,
Yeah.
that helps that sense of safety. Well, we're like working with kids that a lot of times they don't know that sense of safety. So it gives them that space to, like what Paris Goodyear Brown says, to kind of be there and hold the big stories. for
And then
them.
the students say, how do I document that?
Oh,
What do I say?
tell them to watch this symposium, Ann Meehan has a piece on child-centered play therapy progress notes, because I had the same question.
Perfect. And I direct them to the therapeutic powers of play. And I go back
Yes.
to Charles Schaefer's work with the therapeutic
Yes.
powers of play and identify which therapeutic power of play is showing up in the session and why is it, how does that connect to the experience of the young person?
It's so
Yeah,
good. I'm going to put a link to that book below
perfect.
this video. Plus, on the Association for Play Therapy's website, which big shout out for them. I love all the trainings and the credentialing requirements. All of it's incredible. They have an article there that summarizes, I believe it's one that he had written, that has just a good graphic too. So you could get the book and look at that. I'll put links below to all of it.
Perfect.
So
That's a
before
great
we
graphic.
go, I want to make sure, okay, so you and I both have like common loves for Safe and Sound Protocol,
Yep.
Brain Spotting, EMDR. So if you could just kind of summarize your work with, I think we use it in a similar way. There's definitely some wiggle room in how you implement it, but for Safe and Sound Protocol, what are your thoughts on Safe and Sound Protocol, which is developed out of the polyvagal theory, Dr. Stephen Porges' brilliant work?
Love integrating it with my work. Really grateful that they came out with digital files. Struggle with my First Nations clients who can't access the digital files because of lack of internet in their community.
Oh,
So really happy that there's still those core, there's 3 levels of sound files, and those core files can still be accessed from in an MP3 format. I really see it as it's integrative in all sorts of different work that you can do. I've also uh, sometimes kiddos, I've had them in my office listen to parts of the protocol while they're doing Sandtray, because we use a lot of Sandtray at my office, and that sensory touching while they're listening has been, same with neurofeedback, has been really wonderful.
are they
I
just kind of are they like regulating in the sand, or are they doing whatever, like whatever?
whatever, but usually it's they pick 4 or 5 images and are creating a world while they're touching the sand while they're listening to the music, and that's calming. Or just I've had other ones just touch the sand while they're listening to the music. I really, if I'm using it with families, try and get the caregiver to do it first, because I think we all can benefit from feeling calmer and more regulated. And again, when we know that we're doing work with kids who've experienced trauma, sometimes some of the hard stuff is still to come. So to help give extra tools to that caregiver can be really helpful. I actually, with a couple teachers in my community that I knew were struggling, I had said to them, how you doing? When the rules are changing around masks and times, and I had a couple say, I'm really struggling. So I was like, oh, let me share this with you. And they come back and go, thank you. Like, I just feel better armed, right, to feel like I can do what I need to do. So it's a really transformative kind of intervention, I think, that you can use with children, caregivers, other people that are involved in the child's world. And of course, if we use it with caregivers first, then they can help support the child while they're using it. And with some folks, it's just been the connect level, which is the beginning level. Some folks, they've been comfortable to go through all 3 levels. Yeah. And
So I
I
think about, for those that's listening, it's broken up into connect, and then there's 5 hours that you can listen to. That's it's I think the purpose of that is so that when we get to the next level, it's familiar. It's like we've done this
yeah, I
before.
kind of say it's priming your brain and
Yeah,
priming your
priming.
for the next stuff
And then that middle one is like the highly filtered. I've noticed, Teresa, I've noticed amazing results. Not with everybody. It's not like a magic wand, but for some clients, it diffuses that emotionality pretty good.
it's
So
like it primes them for the work.
yes.
And then the balance happens. And then sometimes I've gone back a month later and done balance, but I find, I've had a few folks that have done the whole Safe and Sound protocol, and then, then they're comfortable with brain spotting, right?
Oh, is that your brain spotting thing? I
Yeah,
lost
that's my
mine right
brain
away. I
spotting
just
wand.
used my finger.
Yeah, that's my brain spotting wand. I use that can be really helpful too. With any of the interventions I use though, and I know you're the same, you want to give people tools, just like we want to give listeners tools and supervisees tools and other therapist tools. We want to give the families tools to use in between sessions. So, that's trying to make sure we do some psychoeducation all the way along and explaining why we're doing what we're doing. Because I really want everyone to be a partner in change and a partner in the healing.
I love it. I love it. I love everything about you. I love, even before we hit record, you're telling me stories about Canadian bacon, like the whole year. So fun.
I so appreciate you doing this symposium because, it's been hard during COVID, but also I've been a big advocate of online learning and virtual work because I think it's inclusive. It helps therapists that can't get to trainings, whether they want CEUs or not, that can't get to trainings and they really are hungry for the learning. And then to have the opportunity to connect with people when we're not able to do that face-to-face, it's so important, and it helps us all to feel better about how things are going personally and professionally.
So true. We're wired. We're designed for connection, and we can get it through this means, which is really cool. Okay, before we go, I want to make sure people know where to go to learn more from you. So any books or websites or supervision, whatever it is that people can go to get more of you. I will put the link below here, but just
more of me. I would think I have to do a shout out to a co-editor, Rita Grayson, who I did Sandtray training with. We have a book that's just come out called The Embodied Brain and Sandtray, and it's on Amazon, and the chapters we have contributing authors. It's just a lovely book. And then in the fall, I released a book called Using Teleplay and Virtual Care, and that's on Amazon free, Amazon Unlimited, which made me really excited because I wanted to get it out there. So folks that, and again, we have some really, it has chapters from Canadian therapists that are experts in the field here. So I'm really proud of that book. And my website is just Maritime Play Therapy Center. And there's information on the different trainings that I provide, and folks can get information about services that myself and my associates share with the community. And yeah, you can probably get most of the information there.
Wonderful. Wonderful. The links will be below here. And I do have to say, I've been to Canada twice. I loved it each time. It's a little cold for my taste, but it was just beautiful. Went to Alberta or Redwood Meadows or something outside of Alberta.
Red Deer, maybe.
Yeah. And then a cruise that we went like through New York and went on a beautiful cruise. It might have been up by your area. So.
It might have been. Actually, cruises do that. I have been to Florida more than a few times too, and I kind of really love Florida. So our path will cross face to face at some time, I'm sure. And thank you so much for the amazing work you do, helping folks learn more about integrating EMDR with play therapy.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. And this symposium, because now I can send other people there too, because you have some real amazing guest speakers. So I can't wait to
I have this one guest speaker. Her name is Theresa Fraser. She's amazing.
Okay, our paths will cross again, and thanks so much for inviting me. It was really lovely to have virtual tea with you.
Oh, yes. See you later. Thank you. And there she is. Oh.
That was fun.
That was fun. Mommy enjoyed that. I enjoyed that.